be flexible, be the reed that bends. You know that you're capable. Like whatever the thing is that you need to adapt to, you know that you're capable of doing it, whether it's something that you have to stretch for, reach for, try to achieve, or try to go beyond what you think your means are, or if it's in the reverse, where you have something taken away, you know that you're capable of adapting to that as well.
Lili Zarghami is the founder of Jenny Mag, a new kind of women's magazine created for women over 40 who feel like the media forgot about them. But this isn't just about a magazine, it's about the woman behind it. Lili's life has always been shaped by change, but through it all, she kept showing up, kept building, kept writing her own story. And then, at 46, when she lost her job, she did something bold. She built the thing she wished had existed for her. Something real, unfiltered, something that didn't pretend women over 40 don't exist. If you've ever felt invisible, like your voice didn't matter, or like you were overdue for your own reinvention, this one's for you. And hey, if you want to hear more inspiring stories like Lili's, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Let's dive in. Lili, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you, Holly.
Your story is all about change. From constantly moving around as a kid, shifts in relationships, job loss at 46. How has all of that shaped you and the path that you're on today?
That's such a great question. And when you said it, it had never occurred to me before that that's the entirety of my story. But it really is. It's so funny. I often think about the fact that, I was moved. My high school that I graduated from was the 10th school that I attended. So I've always thought about that was really hard as a kid, but as an adult, it really shapes who I am as a person because I can throw me into any situation and I'm very adaptable. I can make friends quickly. And all of that came from the skills that I had to acquire as a kid, really, being thrown into new schools, new situations all the time. So that has fundamentally shaped me as a person. Job loss was a newer one. Like I'd never lost my job at all, working in media until 2020. And I think again, like the pandemic came and it humbled me as it did most of this world. And it really just taught me about resilience. I always say that I can adapt back down really quickly. Like when you adjust your levels very, very, or at least I can adjust my levels very quickly. Like I know what needs to go. I know what needs to be the priorities and I can shift very quickly. But that was another humbling experience to realize that everything that you thought might be super stable and sure, just might not be. Like on any given day, something crazy could happen and your whole world has been rocked. But I think the thing that through line that you just connected for me that I probably could have spent years of therapy figuring out is truly to be flexible, be the reed that bends, the most useful way that I can think to to coach myself through these kinds of things is that you're capable. Like whatever the thing is that you need to adapt to, that you're capable of doing it, whether it's something that you have to stretch for, reach for, try to achieve or try to go beyond what you think your means are, or if it's in the reverse where you have something taken away or things less than you thought that you had or you needed or you deserved even, that you're capable of adapting to that as well.
The moves had to be hard as a kid, but
yeah.
Did you almost developed a little bit of a superpower because now being able to like walk into a room and make those connections and friends,
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
It really is. Like, on cynical days, I think about it as being, feeling like almost like a spy in the room. Like I can quickly like scan the scene and see like who's good, who's bad, who, that sort of thing. But it really does feel like that. not every kid would have that same reaction to it. Obviously, I think my own kids probably wouldn't have had that same, one of them probably would have been okay. The other one wouldn't have had that same reaction. But, for benefit of my personality too, I was able to kind of use my strengths. Like I was able to, very quickly tune into social norms or to, friend groups that I thought that I might fit with, and figure out ways to align myself with what I wanted, which it can feel like a little bit cynical to talk about that way. But on the other hand, it is like knowing what you want is or need is a useful skill set to have. And I do like, you do learn very quickly when you have to have that kind of repeated reintroduction of yourself. You learn what it is that's you, which I think is not necessarily something most kids know very easily, at least having to, present it. Like, if they're in the same school their whole lives with the same kids, your community knows who you are. They accept you as something else. I had the benefit of being able to reinvent myself, occasionally when I wanted to. But also like really knowing what I'm good at,
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you change it up at times, your background or your story, based on where you were at as a kid?
I really kind of did. I mostly lived on the East Coast. My mom and my stepdad were mostly my stepdad in the baby computer business. So like, as
Okay.
it is now, there's a lot of turnover. It was like that then too. So with, each new job came a move, but I lived anywhere from Washington, D.C. all the way up to New Hampshire on the East Coast. So this generally similar. But when I moved to New Hampshire, I definitely did feel that my dad is Iranian, and he immigrated in the 60s into Washington D.C. and like in that area, like I was nothing special. He was nothing special. Like it was a huge community of immigrants in general, and I didn't feel that I stood out in any way. But when I moved to New Hampshire, which is where we lived in New Hampshire, at least, it was very insular, and it was the kids who were friends in high school were friends because their parents had been friends in high school before them, and so on and so on. And so having this like weird kid who doesn't quite look like everybody else and definitely has a weird name, like this is an odd feeling for me. Like I definitely felt like I stood out and didn't blend in as quite as easily in that super homogenous place. So being there, like, it felt like a matter of survival, having to adapt to what worked there. So in that sense, I guess I did change. But yeah, there were some times when, when you're a little kid, like you just want kids to like you. So and you've got your cool groups and your jock groups, and like all of those cliques existed in like the suburbia that I often lived in. And I never tried to enter a jock group. But there were definitely like, things that I wished I wanted to be cool, or I wanted to be this or that. Like there were times that I did try to do that. Like when I moved to a different school, like, or at least, found I aspired to like a certain group of friends that looked like they would be a good fit for me in many ways until high school, at which point, like I had a much better sense of like myself and my ethics and that sort of thing, which changed it. But yeah, did get to adapt and like, become somebody new each time.
It's good that you learned more about yourself, especially starting high school, because it's
Yeah.
a rough period for a lot of kids.
Yeah, for sure. Middle school was not cute.
No, you mentioned that it was important. I read on your website,
Yeah.
how important it was for you as a mom,
Yeah.
to provide that stability for your kids.
Yeah.
What has that looked like for you? How did you approach that?
It's funny, I also do a single parenting podcast, and like the things that come out that end up being like my parenting philosophy, I never knew were a philosophy to begin with. And this kind of was the same thing. Like I didn't go into, I didn't get pregnant thinking I'm never going to move. These kids are going to have a stable or a single place that they'll live their whole lives. But as soon as they were in school, you know, after kindergarten, when we realized it was a good school and that's where we wanted them to stay and that sort of thing. Kindergarten was a hard leap for me, not for them. But once I realized like that they had good friends, they lived across the street from their school, the community knew them. Like I thought, I cannot imagine ever moving kids from this sort of really lovely feeling of community. The one thing that I've always been, I guess, rueful about is that I don't have childhood friends. And that is something that I love seeing other people have, because those people who have known you your whole life, like outside of your family, obviously, it's a really special connection for me. And when I saw that opportunity for my kids, I thought that is what I want to give them. So it has meant for us, I live in Brooklyn, New York, and it's not cheap. And I worked in media, which is not well paid. But it has meant really, like, you know, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and you know, when their dad and I were still together, like it was 4 of us in here, and it didn't get any bigger when he moved out, even though we're fewer people. But like it's meant sharing space and being in each other's faces a lot, which I kind of love. You know, my sister lives in a big house in Pennsylvania, and it's got 5 bedrooms and a basement, and like that kind of space that people I think often have in this country. And my family who lives in Pennsylvania doesn't understand how I could possibly not have that. You know, how do you not have a yard for your kids? How do you, like, they don't each have their own bedrooms. Kids need space. Kids. And the thing that I see, not my sister, if she's listening, this thing that I see in some families is like, you know, when they're teens or like middle school, kids will just go to their rooms and stay there, and then that's it. And like you see them maybe in the morning on the way out to school, or maybe when they've come back in, but you're not spending a ton of your physical time together. And I see like my sacrifice of having to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, because that's what's affordable for me, as not so much of a sacrifice and more of a relationship building device, if anything. But yeah, so it's you know, been sacrificing space. I have always imagined owning a home, but I've never been able to, because economy, but also like living in
There's that.
living in New York City, it's just, you know, it's not achievable for me here. And it's something that I have dreamed about, you know, having a little place with a yard. But I've interviewed, you know, there's been 1 or 2 times when I've interviewed for jobs that were outside of this city, far flung. And I really had to think hard about, you know, if I get the offer, am I willing to go? And luckily in both times it got close, but never got the offer. So I didn't have to make the decision. But it really it has been something that feels like a huge boon for them. Like, you know, their close friend from kindergarten lives down the street, and, you know, she's about to graduate and go to college, and we all know each other still. And I see her mom, and I see, you know, the crossing guard. I know the crossing guard's name, and just having that sort of sense of place that I never had has been worth any kind of sacrifice that I think that I've had to make, because it doesn't feel like a huge one at all.
I really do think it is important for kids. And we gave our boys the same kind of experience. When they were going to go off to kindergarten, my oldest son, we felt like you needed to set roots and build community. And I know the feeling about seeing their friends that we've known forever.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
It really, really is. Like, I mean, I talk about it all the time that, you know, the family who owns the grocery store around the corner from us has watched our kids grow up. As like, my daughter will still occasionally go to the store with me, and there's one guy who sits near the front, and he would always give them candy, like a little piece of candy or a lollipop or something when they were in the store. She's 18 now, and if she goes in with me, he'll still give it to her, which is like, I think just the sweetest thing. And like one for her brother too. If her brother's not with her, then he'll give her one for that too. And you cannot have that when you are, you know, when you move frequently.
No, definitely not. Well, okay, let's talk about Jenny.
Yeah.
You started this because I think you felt that women over 40 needed some variety in the type of media that was presented to them. Why do you think that was necessary at the time?
Sure. So I had an accidental career in women's magazines starting in my mid 20s. And I always felt like I worked within my demographic. So, when I was in my mid 20s to early 30s, I worked at Redbook, which, that's who they were aiming for. And when I got a little bit older, I worked at other magazines, and it always felt like I was aligned with places that I was writing for and writing to. And by the time I got to 40, there were like one or two options that I also worked for, but I didn't feel like the women that I knew that, were either urban or, hip and cool and like all of the ones who were not like interested in like purging their livers or dropping 43 pounds with this new cleanse, like those things that I saw on the kind of magazines that were aimed at women who are 40 and over, that sell like gangbusters on grocery store newsstands. I thought, I don't know women like this. Like, they don't want to purge their livers and end up, 8 pounds lighter by this weekend. And they don't want to make a mayonnaise layer cake or thing that felt like very different than the kind of women who had content made and aimed for them, that were in, Lucky magazine, or that read Sassy when they were growing up, or, I think that the industry tends to pigeonhole women that are 30 and over into specific categories. So there's lots of magazines about home and decor that are largely aimed at women. And there are health magazines and there are fitness magazines, but there's nothing and I still believe so. There's nothing that's aimed at, like, I'm not going to use Cosmo as like this end all be all, but like when you think of Cosmo, you think of like a 20-year-old woman who, covers everything in her life, from food to fashion to politics to like, just a full lifestyle magazine. And the main target for that magazine is this decade of your life, or like around this decade of your life. And there's nothing like that for women who are 40 or over. Still, we had More magazine in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that went away.
And you're a great magazine, though.
Yeah, it was a great magazine. And I actually I was young, too young for it then, but I do regret like not having been the right age to, to have it for me now. And what I saw, in the last, not the last magazines, the last women's magazines that I worked at that were aimed at like women for 45 and over, 40, 45 and over, was that they had the biggest buying power of any demographic in our country and the lowest desirability from advertisers. So if you don't have advertisers that are willing to advertise to these women, then you don't have a magazine, essentially. Like, that's the sad fact of how the magazine business works, and why it's struggling now is because advertising is so fickle, I guess, as the best possible way to put it. But there's a very core demographic that is interesting to advertisers, and it's males from 18 to 35. And that's it. And we've got tons and tons and tons of content for men like that. And there was nothing for women. And I thought, I don't care if there's no advertising in it right now. I want to make the thing that I need. And so I knew that there would be a desire for, the women who read the same things that I read, or felt the same loss of the entire industry, that as soon as you're 35, maybe maximum, 40 maximum, there's nothing for you. I just turned 49 this week, and I keep hearing that women become like through different means, like a podcast I was listening to, or just all kinds of different things. Women become invisible at 50 and over, or invisible in our society. And I thought, not me. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, but there is something interesting that happens, I think, probably biologically, sociologically, that I don't know, even just what happens when you're like walking down the street, if people are not moving out of your way like they used to, like if, instead of like, giving you space to walk by, they bump your shoulder and make you move. Or like what there's a weird thing that happens that I'm wrestling with still, because I think it's in some senses true, that age is not something that we particularly value in American society. I think that, the thing I said about advertising is a huge portion of it for publishing. If there's not money in it, people are not interested in it. And I think, I mean, to be frank, like I think that the amount of women who want to, because of the value we place on youth and beauty and those sorts of things, women don't want to admit that they are older. So like maybe they're not disappeared, maybe they haven't disappeared, but like maybe they're not making a big deal about the fact that they just turned 49 or, or whatever it might be, or 53. And I think peeling back the kind of, I don't know if you allow swearing on your podcast, the kind of bullshit that's often like associated with what truly is like a misogynistic point of view, that women don't have value anymore once they're over a certain age, is part of what I want to do, because we are exactly this, or not exactly the same. We are the same person, but I think an even better one. Once you turn 40, like I tell this to everybody who's like, a little bit sensitive about like turning the next decade. I thought like 30, I felt like was great because it felt like a sense of gravitas that you get with the decade, the number. And I loved it. And 40, I thought like, oh, finally people will take me seriously. And I hope next year, like when I turn 50, there's a similar kind of revelation and like power I feel in the experience that I've gained in this life. Like every woman that I know who's around my age or older is way cooler than the people I knew when I was in my 20s. They're and then they might be the same people, but like as human beings, they're just so much more interesting, and their stories are so much messier and more complex than they were when we were younger, because life has happened to them. One of the things I love about Jenny is like getting to tell those kinds of stories by these women, and for them. Like, and that's truly what we wanted to do. It's a lot of my founders and I have written a lot, but the majority of our site content has been from women writers who are in the demographic, writing stories that they think other women who are like them will relate to. And they do, which has been exactly what I hoped for. Truly, it feels good to read a story written by somebody who feels like, oh yes, that's what I feel, or I've gone through that too, or thank God I'm not alone. Like whatever the emotional reaction you might have to it is, but that's really the intention there, is giving women kind of company in their lives in a way that they might have felt alone before.
Yeah. And I think life isn't perfect, and it is kind of messy.
Yeah.
But sometimes all that we kind of see out in the real world is everything's perfect, and look at what I can do. But I want to know the mess that you're in. And not because it's a bad thing, but because it's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, I think, is I've got a mother who, just a borderline between great generation and boomer. She was born at the very end of 1945. And the amount of friends I have who have parents around the same age have the same experience that I have, where everything is positive. Like there's nothing that could go wrong, or nothing bad, or even if something bad did happen, there's always a positive spin on it. And to me, it feels like toxic positivity in a lot of cases. But I understand where it came from, like geopolitically, at the end of the war and all of that stuff. But I mean, my rebellion has been kind of, as I grew up, was in this radical transparency about when things suck, they kind of suck. And like, being able to share that messiness. And for me, I tried to always share it with some joy and humor, because that's just my natural inclination, that, finding the funny in something terrible is the way that I get through it. But sharing that kind of story without necessarily having every story that we publish wrapped up neatly in a bow with a perfect
Mm.
kind of revelation or ending that feels neat and tidy is something that we wanted to do too. Is, our lives are messy, but the messiness is the is part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, I agree. You have a lot of courage because you write about some really, like vulnerability in your stories. How do you find, because I have such a hard time with that. I always feel like, ooh, do I really want to share that? But I
Yeah.
really do. So where did you find the courage to do that?
Well, I will say with my own story, I am only comfortable sharing the messiness that I am comfortable sharing. So, when I try to write a story that I don't feel deeply the need to share, it's not as easy. So,
Okay.
having this kind of wide swath of writers who all have different comfort levels about what they're willing to share. We can do a lot of like sex and dating stories. And personally, that is something that I am so prudish about sharing. Like, I don't know why, but like, that's not for me. But we have lots of writers who like really enjoy telling stories that way and like aren't embarrassed in any way. And it's similar for me. I wrote about when we first launched, I wrote about I took Manjaro for almost a month, one of the weight loss drugs. And that was I did a 3-part series about it. And I never even questioned, oh, should I feel like, is it weird that I'm sharing this? Or like people will know that I think that, that I'm overweight, or that my doctor thought I was overweight, or that I want to be thinner. Like all of those questions didn't even occur to me. Like this was just a story that I thought, this is something I have to tell. And I think, I've been a writer since I was a little kid. I'm not the greatest, but it's where I feel the most catharsis. When there's anything big that goes on for me, I process my emotions, especially if they're stuck and I feel really bad. I process them through writing them. So I think that's probably where it initially comes from, is like, I need to tell this story. Like this has to get out of me. Um, and I do look, of course, like I do edit things out of stories I have a story that I'm working on right now about like some family dynamic things that I'm like, ooh, I hope nobody gets mad at this, or like, I hope but what ends up being more important, I think, than and I am very careful. Like I never want to make anybody purposefully, angry or hurt. Um, but what ends up being the most important thing is like, I know people are going to relate to this. And if I'm being vulnerable enough to share this and they feel seen, then that feels good.
And sometimes it makes it a little bit easier, like you said before,
Yeah.
just not that fear of being the only one.
Yes. Yes. More than anything, like,
Mhm.
as somebody with generalized anxiety disorder, I will say, literally naming the problem is one of the therapy tricks that they teach you, to talk when you're dealing with anxiety. And that might be part of it too. Like you take the power out of this big bad thing when you can talk about it. And no matter what that thing is, I was just reading a story that we got pitched about, for Mother's Day is coming up. And it was, a woman who lost her mother 25 years ago, half of her life ago. And, that kind of, she talks about like the power that relationship or lack of relationship has had over her whole life. And just being able to like to tell this story helps you move on from it a bit. At least it does for me. Like not everybody writes in the same way, but for me, that's, I think, a huge part of it.
Well, and that something I feel we don't tend to typically talk about. You're not going to meet somebody
Yeah.
and be like, "Hey, I lost my mom 25 years ago
Yeah.
and it really kind of screwed me up."
Yeah.
But when you read that story, you're like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
get it. I can
Yeah.
see why you would feel that way."
Yeah, absolutely. And, my co-founder, Megan, wrote this super vulnerable story about miscarriage, and mother-daughter relationships. She has one child that she got pregnant with very, very easily, but had, a very difficult time afterwards, and, shared loads and loads of really vulnerable experiences that nobody who's, just dealing with her on a day-to-day basis will necessarily know about, but it informs her entire person, and so being able to kind of share that and knowing that there are other people out there walking around with exactly the same sort of thing going on right now that you may not know about is just it seems like a privilege to get to do that. And our readers have, responded in a way, and different readers on different stories, which is kind of the best thing, is that somebody will say like, oh, this story, this is exactly what I felt. Nobody talks about this. Or yes, Mother's Day is so hard for me because my mom died. Or no, I love that you wrote it, had a story with somebody who didn't want to have kids, because I don't want to have kids. And people constantly have said this to me, like, oh, just wait, or whatever it is. There's so many perspectives that we have as a human race that aren't clean and easy for a lot of typical publications to share, that we think, no, that is exactly what we want to share, because it's not pretty. It's not this like Instagram filtered version of life. It's messy and complicated, and that kind of gives texture to our lives, because if everything was beautiful, then nothing is beautiful. I mean, truly, that is the paradigm. If everything is perfect, like nothing is special. So, getting to poke your finger in the hole of that like filter a little bit, and be like, I see it feels like the tiniest bit, like fighting back against the paradigm that everything has to look a certain way or be a certain way or feel a certain way.
How do you encourage more women to tell their stories? Because I think it's such an important tool for all of us, and especially as we get a little bit older
Yeah.
and things change. There's a lot of change at this part of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know that I've ever had to encourage women to tell their stories, because I think one of the real, and again, I'm making sweeping generalizations, so I apologize, but I think one of the things that women are really good at is being in relationship with each other. And part of that relationship is sharing. So sharing the story that thing that your husband said last night that you cannot believe it, with your best friend on the phone the next day, or whatever it might be. That is telling your story, the kind of thing that I think is valuable to like future generations. Like I often imagine, my grandmother lived to be nearly 100. And still there are things that I think about with her. I'm like, oh, I wish I could have asked her about this, or talked to her about this, or like, how did she survive when she was born during the Spanish flu? She had 4 children with a husband who's lost his leg in World War I, and then was the sole provider, in the 40s for these 4. Like, I want to talk to her about that. So I think, if anything, if you find value in sharing it, even if it's not publicly sharing, even if it's like writing journals, the value that will provide to future generations of your own family, I think, is remarkable, because we often, as parents or family members, our family members only know certain parts of us, and being able to write like the full thing is so unique, that it's like, I think it feels like a service, that you're doing to provide for your family. Like my own stepmother has journals that her own mother had written that were, I mean, they're probably now 150-year-old journals from when she was a child. And like, she translated them and like read through them. And like, you just learn about the whole person that way. I don't know. So if that's appealing to you, then do it. I would say, like, a lot of women are fearful that they're not good enough writers, or that they're not, they don't know what they're doing. And I I've had that kind of imposter syndrome feeling myself, because I did not go to school for writing, and I did not go to school for journalism. I went to school for the classics, and I would in philosophy. So if you want to talk about that, we can. But it's not something that I use in my day-to-day life. But a lot of the women that I work with very much so went to, that very traditional media path. And I have felt like, oh, God, I don't know if this story's any good. Like, I didn't even go to journalism school. And Megan has said to me, like, you've done this for 25 years. Like, it doesn't matter You didn't go to journalism school. You know what you're doing here. And I think that's true for most women. Like, you don't have to find the perfect words to tell your story or the perfect medium or know how to make a website. Um, the adage of like writing what you know, I think is super, super valuable. It's why I feel more comfortable telling stories that I want to tell, because it's not me trying to find the right words. It's literally like, it feels like being a vessel from, the things that are in my head to the things that need to get out. Like, I'm just the medium that it's going through. That's all you really need. Like, what are the things that you think would be important to tell somebody? And that's it.
Yeah, well, so I think you don't want to live your life without anybody. I love how you said that about being able to read what that would be your great grandma journals and finding out, because you always see these people in pictures as
Yeah.
they're older, and you're like, what did she think when she was a little
Yeah.
girl? Like, where they have a dream or a favorite something.
Yeah.
It's just special to know that, to learn those things.
It really is. Like, and we all have kind of like this family lore that's passed down to us. I was just telling somebody the other day that, oh yeah, right, my grandmother was 18 and my grandfather was 38, and they had to leave the state to get married for whatever. And I was like, wait, I know that they did leave the state to get married, but I don't quite remember why. Like, and the family stories that get passed down, like, how amazing to be able to go back and be like, oh, why did my mom have to run off to Maryland to get married? Like, why was that so quick? Why was that did her parents not approve? Like, what was the deal that, like, it'd be
Yes.
how fascinating it would be to like have that written down for your children or your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, to be able to reference one day.
Because there probably is a really good story
Yeah.
back there, and it was life. Like, they clearly had to take care of some business,
Oh, yeah.
and they made it happen.
Yeah. I've had, even, I know we're talking about women mostly, but like I've been making a concerted effort with my own father to like get the stories out of him, because I've had the experience with my grandmother of missing, getting to talk to her, that I keep asking him, like, wait a second, when you said this, like, what really happened there? Like, I know you were sent off to school and then school didn't happen and then you came back somehow and then came to him. Like, what? Can you walk me through again?
Right?
Yeah, like, it's such a privilege to get to ask that question of my own dad right now. And it would be just so lovely to have the book.
Is he questioning you? Like, I hope you're not putting any of this on the internet.
He doesn't, no. Luckily for him, he doesn't. He trusts, he's proud of me, but he's not reading what I'm doing. That's as far as it goes. It's like, oh yeah. That's, what do you do again? As a lot of parents ask their kids, like, not totally sure. You do something with internet, right? Can you help me with FaceTime? Like, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's funny. You're starting to come into a new phase of life with your, children are older now. And are you going to have an empty nest?
I am. We just, at the end of last month, I guess it was, where we found out my daughter had gotten into a bunch of colleges, and we found out my son got into the one that he wanted to go to. So I'm actively getting weepy at literally everything that happens. My son's got a show tonight, and like, I know I will cry watching him perform, because like, how many times am I going to get that sort of thing?
Yeah.
But it is, I texted their dad recently, because we had a notice from the building that was like, oh, the elevator is going to be out of commission for 10 weeks. And in my head, I did like the calculations, oh, how far is 10 weeks from now? And I thought, we don't have the kids at home for much longer than that. Like, and I texted him, I was like, the kids are only going to be with us for 16 more weeks or so. And he's like, I know, it's crazy. Like, I know, I don't know how. And for some reason, we've been working towards this all of their lives, but putting that kind of very finite timeline on it has made it feel so much more brutal, because when you're in the midst of it, you're thinking like, oh, let's get them through the SAT. Let's get
Yeah.
them through the applications. Let's make sure, let's cross our fingers and hope they get in where they want to go. And like, oh, let's figure out the money. Like all of these logistical
Yeah.
things kind of get in the way of, oh, wait, I'm going to be living here alone when they go. Like, I I don't, I don't, I don't know. Like for the very, very beginning, I'm sure there will be a mix of sadness and relief at not having to make dinner. Um, what's killing me now is like food still. For 18 years, I've been making meals every day. People want to eat every single day, and it's killing me. Uh,
Yeah, imagine the nerve of them.
the truly, truly. I mean, I would just have some crackers if it was just me. But
Thank you. Yes.
that so it's going to be interesting. Like what's funny is, when we launched, Elizabeth and one of my other co-founders had just sent her younger daughter to college, and the older one was already there. And so she was writing through her a beginning of her empty nesthood, and I saw it as like, oh, that's going to happen soon, but it's not me yet. It's not me yet. And so I read a lot of people's experiences about what it feels like. And their dad and I separated just before the pandemic, and just divorced a couple of years ago. So it's really alone. Like it's not just going to be like, oh, the two of us get rent an RV and go on a road trip. It's going to be me figuring out, and now what. But I'm a little bit excited about the amount of day that will feel like it's mine again. um
Mhm.
what the kind of mom that I am is, I'm a I show my love with acts of service for my children. And like, constantly have people telling me like, why don't you make them cook dinner for you? They're old enough now. And I know they are old enough now, and they could do it, and I'm sure they would do a great job. But it's literally how I show them that I love and care about them, is by taking care of things for them in a way that, I mean, I'm sure that I wished the 80s were a different time. Like we were
Yeah.
feral and we were on our own a lot. And I had a working mom, and I was a latchkey kid and all of that. But the way that I've tried to make sure that their childhood is very much a childhood is by being the mom that I thought that could enable that. So it's going to
Yes.
be a very strange shift. I've wondered, like, do I take them off of Find My Phone? Like, is that invasion of their privacy? Do I still have them on that when they're in college? Like, but what if they get murdered and I need to tell the police where the body is? Like,
And they're like, didn't you have Find My Phone? You're like, no.
it is. But I think what will be nice is like, and I think about that already. So like I'm trying to seed little bits of joy and hope again in like what will be coming for this big change. Like when I leave the office, I think like, oh, maybe I could go to a movie or like meet a friend for drinks, or like, not that I haven't done things like that here and there, but now when I won't have anybody that I feel responsible for coming home
Yes.
to, that will feel very, very different. Or, I'm a big walker. I walk like 6 to 8 miles a day. But when I'm on my way home, I just try to get home as fast as I can, because I gotta get to the grocery store and gotta get dinner made. And I want to be here when everybody's back home, and so that we can spend as much time together as we can. And that'll be different too. So maybe I'll walk home over the Brooklyn Bridge one day because it's a beautiful day out. But truly,
Right? There's no urgency.
there really won't be that same kind of urgency. But I'm excited to be able to get to work more on Jenny, because my founders and I have full-time jobs, so we're doing this truly out of love. We're able to do it because we have full-time jobs. It's different full-time jobs than this. We would love one day if we get to the point that this is a giant media empire that can support us. But for us, it's like, we're working at night, we're working in the morning, and we're working on the weekends on this. So having that time feel a little bit freer will feel really nice, so that, I won't feel as guilty. I've got a story I've got to edit this weekend, for
Yeah.
example. And like, I'm like, okay, well, when my son is sleeping and my daughter is at work, I won't feel guilty, working on the story. So that'll be nice to kind of have that time to myself again. Plus, also maybe I'll date again. There's always a possibility that, because for now, for me, it has thought like I can't imagine where in my day that I could fit another
Can't
person
fit
in.
in.
Yes, yeah. So maybe, I think there's a ton of possibilities. And again, I'm only 49. Like I've got a lot of time to do a lot of things that could be super exciting. And I don't even know what they are yet. Like if you asked me 5 years ago, what would I be doing? Like it's not this. I wouldn't have guessed this. So I think there's a ton of potential along with like the inevitable sadness and sentimentality that are about to come.
But also very exciting. Where can we find you and where can we follow along on this journey?
For sure. So you can find us at jennymag.com is our website. We can same on Instagram. You can find all of our social on the website most easily. We're at Jenny Mag on Instagram and Threads and Facebook. We don't do Twitter because of reasons. Um, we are on Blue Sky, but we're not posting there right now. It's just a placeholder. But we're most active on Threads and Instagram. But if you're still on Facebook, we'll talk to you there as well. Yeah, that's where we are. We've got a weekly newsletter too. So if coming to social media or coming to a website every week is like not something that you're willing to do, sign up for our newsletter, which you can also find on the website, and we'll deliver stories right to your box once a week. It's some people prefer it that way, and I'm not one of them, but plenty of people do. So like if you like that, we've got newsletters for you too.
Perfect. Well, with that in mind, thank you so much for
Oh,
taking the time to be here
you're
today.
so welcome.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my eye open for September and see if there's any changes in the stories that you're going to start to tell.
I'm sure there will be. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.